for his opening statement.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Welcome to our witnesses. About 90% of my personal and political philosophy is don't hurt anyone else unless you have to defend yourself. Don't take other people's stuff, and leave me alone. I believe in free enterprise. I believe in markets. I believe in the ingenuity and the persistence of the American people, of all people, humanity. Non-compete clauses are sort of like Senate bills. There's some good ones and there are some bad ones. Non-compete clauses, by their definition, are a restriction, operate as a restriction on both the employer and the employee. So from one perspective, there are restrictions on free enterprise. That doesn't mean that they're inappropriate in all cases. When it's necessary to protect business information, when it is necessary to protect trade secrets, when those agreements are negotiated by two parties of reasonably equal bargaining strength, there can be a place for non-compete agreements. They can also be abused. I don't think it's appropriate for example, a fast food restaurateur. I don't know if this example even exists, but I've heard some people allege it. Shame on them if it's not true. But if it is true, I don't think a fast food restaurateur should ask entry-level employees to sign a non-compete agreement. Then what's the point other than to restrict free enterprise? That makes no sense to me. I think it's also very important for us and for the courts to take a look at the bargaining strengths, relative bargaining strength of the parties. I don't believe in contracts of adhesion. I think that people ought to, all things being equal, ought to be able to address these issues with the same amount of leverage. Now, we live in the real world. I know that balance doesn't always exist, but it's something that we have to take a look at. Most state law, of which I'm aware, requires that non-compete agreements be reasonable. And courts, I think, at both the state, to some extent at the federal level, but generally it's a state issue, take a look at the length of the non-compete agreement. They look at the bargaining strength of the parties. They look at the terms, obviously. They look at what behavior is being restrained. Why is it necessary to restrain that behavior? What are the interests of the employee? What are the interests of the employer? And if they're reasonable and there's a legitimate purpose, I think in most cases they've, let me say this, in many cases they've been upheld. I'm going to stay as long as I can today. I'd like to hear your testimony. I'd like to ask you questions. We've got a lot going on. I think a vote has already been called, and I'm going to have to go down and vote. But what my friend Senator Warren said in her opening statement, notwithstanding about Republicans, that's kind of this Republican's point of view about non-compete agreements. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Kennedy. And now I'd like to introduce